Okay, enough procrastinating. It's time. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Thank you for being here. Welcome to you if you're new. How's everyone doing? Summer is officially over. I don't know if that's true by calendar, but by the way I feel, it's most certainly true. And I really do notice the turn of seasons. I grew up in Los Angeles and I didn't know what the turn of seasons was really. I just never really remember seasons. It was always a sort of middle ground. I never even really had like a real winter coat my entire childhood. I never needed it. But when I moved to the East Coast at age 18, then I really fell in love with that. I love the way that I have to earn my spring with a winter, and the way the void of the summer leads into the momentum of the fall. And I can feel that impending fall. It hasn't happened, we're maybe even still technically summer. I don't even know what the linear calendar time is saying. I'm going on my biological time, which is something that we talk about today with my guest, Chara Caruthers. But before I talk about Chara, let me check in with you on a couple of things. First, I'm wondering if any of you happened to read the blog post that I put out last week. I just put it out. I haven't even sent out an email about it. I think that might go out this week. But if you haven't checked it out, you might. It's called, Does Yoga Teach Kindness? And it was really a bit of a reflection on my part. It was triggered by an experience with my daughters, where my elder daughter was being really mean to her younger sister and treating her in a hurtful manner. And I was upstairs and watching news and feeling really downhearted in myself over all the meanness and injustice and all of it, And then I go downstairs and my elder daughter's teasing her younger sister, and I'm looking at my younger daughter's face, and she's just being filled with shame and feeling crappy about herself, and I just snapped at her. And I said, "Stop it." And I yelled at her, and I said, "We will be kind in this house. Do you understand?" And I started crying. I started crying and just saying, "Listen, we're not going to be unkind in this house, I won't have it." And my daughters, they looked at me like I was like, are you okay? I've reprimanded them a bunch of times for fighting or whatever, but I'm not usually that emotional and forceful. And so in any case, that led to a whole inquiry in myself, because I think of the yoga practice that I do and teach as a vehicle for learning and cultivating kindness. That's what I've used to have that. And if you listen to the show, at the end of every one, I ask us to do that. And I think of what I do as a yoga teacher very much about that. At the same time, I started to ask myself, well, where did I get that from? I've also had a lot of people on here, scholars and people doing all kinds of research and really questioning the origins of things. And I started to think, well, where did I get that? Where did I get the idea that yoga is about kindness from? Like, there isn't a yama for that, right? I mean, you could say ahimsa, non-harming, could be kindness, but you could also not hurt anyone and not be kind. So if it's not from a text that I'm getting it from, maybe it would be from an interpretation of a teacher that I've had, but not really so much necessarily. Really, it's been my experience of utilizing the tools of practice to get what I need. I needed kindness, and that's what's healed me, and that's what I'm making it about. So really, in some level, it's really about language, maybe. I can't say yoga teaches kindness, but I could say my experience of yoga practice is about kindness, and I'd like to share that with you. I could say that. That's legit. So for whatever it's worth, I encourage you to check out the blog. There's more to it there. And that does lead to the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is an idea I have for this coming year. Some of you have been around. You've heard me have lots of discussions and express my views on the business side of things and yoga teachers and what we have to do to make a living. And so this coming year, I'm going to try something a little bit different, something I haven't done before, something maybe a little bit out of the box. As I have been discussing over the last year or two here on the show, I've been traveling quite a bit since I let go of my center in Brooklyn just over 2 years ago. I've taught at all kinds of different centers, big centers, small centers, in all kinds of different places. But this year, I want to try booking my own tour of sorts, if that makes sense, where I have got a list of cities that I've never been to that I'd like to go to. And I'm interested in finding alternative space arrangements in those cities to host my own events. And I'm calling it Gentle is the New Advanced, Easing the Pain 2020. As I was just saying, for myself, practice is a lot about kindness and easing pain in myself so that I can enjoy and appreciate the fact that I'm here more. And that's sort of the message I'm going to head out into 2020 with. It's an election year. I figure there's going to be all kinds of pain on all kinds of levels. It's not just physical pain, but mental, emotional, spiritual pain, whatever it is. I'm interested in cultivating rituals of self-care where we can figure out what we need and where we need to get it, and ultimately come together to support each other in that. So you can potentially help me out some. Over the next few weeks, I'm coming up with an itinerary. And if you want me to come to your town and you know of a space that you think would make sense, that's not going to cost a lot of money for me to use for 2 days, I'm going to do 2-day intensives, 4 sessions over 2 days. And if you got a space that you think might make sense, you should totally get in touch with me. You should send me an email. Let me know. Over the next 2 to 3 weeks is the time to get in touch with me as I figure out my plan. But I'm excited about it. I think it'll be a real test of some of the ideas that I've been talking about here and that I've been kicking around. I am going to still be going to some centers in the year as well, but there will also be the Gentle is the New Advanced Easing the Pain Tour 2020. And if you want to bring me to where you are, hit me up. I would be very happy to hear from you. Okay, so now let me tell you about today's talk with Chara Caruthers. Chara and I have come to know each other some through my weekly teachers class. Some of you know that I do that. I have a weekly video call that I do, which you could totally get in on if you want. Chara has, and we've had some wonderful exchanges, and she brings a lot to the table into our group, as well as everybody. We have a really amazing group of people there, and Chara's been a really valuable voice. And I happened to jump on social media and catch an ad for a Ayurvedic cooking show hosted by none other than Chara Caruthers. And she was amazing. It was such a good promo. Like, it was really well done, and she came across through the camera in a really engaging way, and I was very excited to see that. And I knew that she was a yoga therapist and that she had studied Ayurveda extensively, but it wasn't until I saw her in this, promo ad where she was really putting it out there to everyone that it hit me that she was an ideal person for me to have a conversation with about Ayurveda. I have some hangups, maybe. I don't know if they're hangups, but some not so great experiences in the past with looking into Ayurveda. And I talk about that some with Chara. And I just think in general, I've been reluctant to have a conversation about Ayurveda because I didn't know who I would have the conversation with. And Chara's specialty is making these principles accessible and actual and practical. And that's what I needed. And so I suggested that we have the conversation that you are going to hear today. Before we get to that, I have a question. I'm wondering, how many of you are using MindBody Online on a regular and are the manager or owner of that studio? If that's you, I want to suggest that you take a look at today's sponsor, KarmaSoft. Longtime listeners have heard me talk about KarmaSoft many times now because they are our longest standing sponsor. And I speak from experience because this is the software that I used when I had my center in Brooklyn. And I just think it's better. I think it's more efficient. I think it's more user-friendly. My teachers could sign in their own classes without having to be trained extensively to do it. And most importantly, the owner of the company, Rudy Senecal, is a truly upright guy. I know him. He's been on the show before. You should go back and listen to the episode. We talk all about the company and my experience of it and why I think it's superior. And really, I just think if you have to do that kind of work of scheduling classes and doing payrolls and managing a center, KarmaSoft's going to make your life better. So check it out. Go to karmasoftonline.com. Also, I got a couple of gigs coming up. I'm going to be at the Central PA Yoga Love Fest, September 28th. I am also going to be at the Yogi Underground in Falls Church, Virginia, October 5th and 6th. You can find out about those gigs and more, and all of my other stuff at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, I will touch base with you on the other side. I'll tell you about what's coming next week, but I think it's good. I think we should go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Chara Caruthers. Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. All good.
Okay, Chara.
Hey.
We've sorted through some of the tech, and here we are.
Yes.
And I have to just say right from the beginning, I have to give myself and you and anyone who might listen to this a little bit of a disclaimer because, we scheduled this some while back and, I don't know why it's different now, but I never used to feel the same effects of jet lag that other people felt. Like I used to recover really quickly.
Yeah.
When I traveled.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm getting older and it's changing, but I got back from Japan yesterday.
Oh, geez, I didn't realize it was that soon. Okay.
Yeah, well, normally I slept a bunch. I would think I would be fine.
Yeah.
But I'm a little loopy right now. So just, if I spin out into some liminal rant or something, just for you and anybody listening to know that's why. But I did not want to cancel because I was looking forward to talking to you.
Oh, good on you.
Yeah. And, also for me, I think the process of, deciding what to record, who to record with next for the show is very intuitive. I don't have any big plan about it. Like there'll just be a little moment where something I'm thinking about, or something that's always interested in me, or like a gap in like my understanding or knowledge of things, and I'm thinking about it, and then all of a sudden something will pop up, and kind of on a whim I'll go, oh, there you go, that's the conversation. And that happened some with you.
Cool.
Well, first we have gotten a chance to know each other some via my teacher's class.
Yep.
And people in that group, and just in general, when someone tells you like what they do, like I knew you studied Ayurveda and were like a yoga therapist, but you don't really know about their work necessarily, like until you have a chance to experience more.
Yeah.
And in any case, I had been thinking about Ayurveda quite a bit because it's the one area where I'm kind of this most stupid in certain regards. Like, I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. I know some. I'm not stupid about it, but I've never really studied it. And I've been turned off by it on a couple occasions. Just because I think like yoga, it has a lot of different viewpoints.
Yes.
And a lot of different like ways that it gets presented.
Yep.
And some of them, just didn't sit well with me. Or also I just think I'm kind of dyslexic and somewhat fussy when it comes to my learning process. So if, I don't know, certain ways things get presented, I get turned off. That's what I want to say. However, I've been talking with you some in that group, and you're super communicative. Like you're very clear in the way that you communicate, and I've enjoyed our interaction. And then I was randomly on social media. I'm never on social media anymore. And this is kind of a weird case for it, but I'm never on social media these days, but I go on for a second, and a promo thing for your Ayurveda your TV show popped up. And I was like, oh my God, it's Chara. And like to see you in that other context and kind of presenting Ayurveda in this really accessible way. And I was like, oh, wow, I could talk to Chara about Ayurveda, And then, even just recently, like this coming week, this will post much later, I have a talk from the Lehigh Valley Yoga Festival, and it was about mindfulness. And someone on the panel was this Ayurvedic doctor.
Okay, cool.
And I asked him a little bit about Ayurveda. And, he was a really funny, wonderful guy. He had like this claim to fame. He had given Ayurvedic treatments to George Harrison from the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like he was really funny. We got along really great. But when he talked about Ayurveda, he basically said you have to study for lifetimes to really understand it. And, at certain times in his, conversation about it, he would break into chanting about, Vedic chanting.
Yeah.
So he's real old school, which was awesome. It was really wonderful, but very different than what I was seeing coming from you,
Yeah.
So anyways, this is a long ways around to say I'm real curious about you, first of all, and then also, your way into Ayurveda and the way that you're presenting it and making it something that people could hang on to a little bit easier, maybe?
Yeah.
So I guess the first thing that I noticed is that it says that you were born and raised in Southern California. What part?
I was born in Orange County in Fullerton, California.
What? Did you know that I'm from Southern California?
Yeah, I do, actually. From like LA or the Valley or something like that.
From the San Fernando Valley. So not too far from each other. And I guess I'm curious about that too. I don't know how old you are. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but
I'm 50 this year.
Okay, so we're close because I'm 47, and I'm just thinking about like my 80s childhood in Southern California and like what we were eating.
Yes. In fact, I was thinking because you had said something. You had said something on the podcast, I think, about like having Twinkies or something, and like you're thinking, with your daughters that they really needed to try this whole Twinkie thing. And I was listening to it, thinking about all those Hostess products, Ding Dongs, and just all of that stuff, and thinking that was the food of my childhood.
Did you eat that stuff too? So I wasn't the only one?
Nope, you were not the only one. That stuff played a large part of my childhood diet.
So what were your parents doing there? What did your parents do?
My dad was a PE teacher, And he ended up he did that for, I think, about 35 years, something like that. And then my mom was like an administrator. She worked in a couple of, she worked for the Hunt Wesson Company for a while, and she was kind of doing more administrative work. Okay. And they had kind of grown up in the Midwest and made their way as children to California. And then I think they kind of had this idea like they were going to kind of give their kids this, as parents do, kind of as the best life possible. And so that's kind of how we ended up, this African-American family in Orange County.
That's what I was wondering. Was there a lot of other African-American families in Orange County when you were growing up?
There were some, but honestly, like I could probably count on one hand the number of black kids that were in my school, including myself and my sister.
Well, I remember even just recently, like in the last presidential debate, they brought up busing. Like I remember there was a period of time when I was a kid where these like laws got passed, these busing laws in Los Angeles. Yeah. And my parents pulled me out of the public school system and put me in a private school because they were going to send me to the school in the inner city, and then my parents didn't want me to go there. They were taking the white kids and putting them in the inner city schools, taking the kids from the inner city and bring them to the suburbs. And it only happened for like kind of a year or so, and then they changed it back. They changed the rules again, but I don't remember it being all that diverse.
Yeah, I mean, for us, my parents just moved us to a place where, to a pretty white middle class kind of neighborhood. And so, there wasn't any busing where we were, but of course we were in the suburbs. So, but yeah, I do have a very distinct memories of being, kind of feeling a little bit like a square peg in a round hole kind of thing, in school, but that was what I knew, that was all I knew growing up.
All right. So what did you split town when you were 18 like me, or what?
Totally.
That's what I remember talking to my dad, and we used to have this joke, and we'd be like at a party with a bunch of friends, and he'd say, Jay, when you leaving town, when you getting out? Oh, he would say, when you moving out? And I would say, as soon as I'm 18, Dad, I'm out of here, I was ready to go. So did you split when you were 18 too, you said?
I did. I left when I was 17, but I left to go to the big city. So I left to go to university in LA. So, kind of growing up in Fullerton, which is about, It's about an hour drive outside of kind of LA proper. Growing up, like LA was the big time kind of thing. And I remember going there every once in a while with friends to, go to museums or go to various things. And so when it came time to go to school, to go to university, I definitely had wanted to leave home. And so I left home at 17 and I went to school in LA.
To UCLA?
Yeah, I went to UCLA.
So Westwood.
Yeah.
I remember Westwood. That was like what cool place to go, like buy like Doc Marten shoes and stuff.
Right? Totally. It was the epitome of the LA experience. I remember at that time, Randy Newman had this great song, I Love LA. Do you remember that song?
Sure, of course.
Oh, and I just remember every time when I was, at the end of high school going to LA with friends and stuff, just thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. We're here, we're in LA. And it was great. It was a wonderful experience going to UCLA and living in Westwood for a bit and then Santa Monica as well in my later years of school.
Well, we're a little bit close to ships passing, but I only got into really two schools, UCLA and NYU, and I chose NYU. I wanted to get far away from LA. I mean, I grew up closer to LA than you did, and we used to go in all the time. Like I said, even when I was in high school, we used to go hang out in Westwood all the time. So I wanted to get out of there, but all right. So you went to Yeah, but still, UCLA was pretty cool. And yes, it was definitely the epitome of LA, for sure. So what did you study in school?
I studied civil engineering.
That's what my dad did. Wow. So
yeah,
did you graduate with a degree in civil engineering?
I did. Yeah, I did. Wow. A couple of years into it, they told us when we first got there for like our orientation and whatever, they told us this is a 5-year program. It's a 5-year study. And I was like, okay, because everyone, normal majors or courses of study at that time were usually 4 years, and I'm not even sure if it's changed much. If things have, because here in Australia things are 3 years. But I remember thinking, okay, I'm in this for the long run. And after about 2 or 3 years into it, I thought, oh God, this is so not me. This is so not what I want to do. But I kind of had that like fear of like, what else am I going to do? Like, I don't know what else I'm interested in. And so I kind of convinced myself that I would just, knuckle down and get through it, and then, make some decisions when I finished school about what I would actually do.
Wow, my dad, he was vice president of Tishman Construction.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Worked on like major projects like World Trade Center and Epcot Center, and like ultimately he taught design build at University of Colorado. And
wow.
I remember being on a site with him, and he had some students, and there was a few of them who were women, and he was just talking about how few women there were and how much better they were at the job.
Okay. I get
that. But it was like a totally male-dominated field, civil engineering, it seemed to me.
Totally. It was a male-dominated major. It was a male-dominated, and then eventually when I finished school, I actually worked in Los Angeles for a year before leaving. But totally male-dominated industry, and so I've been carrying this kind of square peg round hole kind of situation for a lot of my life. Just that experience of always feeling like I didn't quite fit in the situation. But it was definitely male-dominated.
So how long did you work as a civil engineer?
I did that for about 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I did it for about 10 years. I started out and I worked in LA for the LA Department of Transportation for a year. And I think it was my third year of university, I met this Australian guy, and he was on exchange from Melbourne University. And so I did, I went ahead and finished my schooling, and I did my year in LA, and then I moved to Australia.
Okay, and so when you got to Australia, you got another civil engineering gig there?
I did, yep. I started working as a traffic consultant, and, ended up working for traffic consultancy, and then I worked for the Department of Land and Water Conservation in New South Wales, and then we left again, and we moved to London, and we lived in London for a couple of years, and I was doing project management for the publishers there. And then we left there and we moved to New York, and we ended up living in New York for about 7 years.
So you did civil engineering in New York too?
Well, by that time it was more project management.
Okay.
So I was doing project management on technology projects and things like that. Okay,
so where does like yoga and Ayurveda happen in there?
Well, it fits into all of this, because I think in 1990 when I went to Australia. I think it might have been 1991. I went to Australia. It was on vacation from school. So my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, had gone back, had finished his thing, his exchange, gone back to Australia. And so I thought, right, I'll come and visit him and just see what I think of the place. And he was all into yoga and studying, all kinds of stuff, astral projection and all this stuff that I had just never heard of. No idea. He had books on Ayurveda and all kinds of stuff. And he said, let's go to a yoga class. And I was like, yeah, okay, I've heard of that. I'll try it. And I fell asleep in the class, not in Shavasana.
Not in Shavasana, huh? During the sun salutations, huh? You just lay down.
It was one of those hatha classes where you're just, you kind of take a pose and then you just kind of sit in it for a little while, and then they kind of move you into another. It was probably kind of more like an Iyengar-based thing.
Or like lots of rests in between, so you had lots of rooms to doze off. I get it.
Exactly. And so I just fell asleep in the class. I was like, all right. And because it was early in the morning, it was probably like 7 o'clock in the morning, something. Yeah. So that was my first taste of yoga. That was
how did that go? Were you embarrassed? Did they call you out? What happened? Were you snoring? How did you come to in the class?
I don't even remember, to be honest. I do remember feeling afterward like, okay, I've heard about this stuff. This is what this is all about. And perhaps even feeling a bit like, yeah, I could take this or leave this. Mm-hmm. It's a bit quiet for me. And so I didn't really do much yoga until we moved to New York. So we moved to New York in 1998. And we lived in Brooklyn, and there was a yoga and a Pilates studio kind of around the corner from us.
What part of Brooklyn were you in?
We were in Park Slope.
Okay. I don't know that. I don't know the centers. I don't remember the centers there back then. That was a while back, but.
Yeah, it was. And I don't even remember the name of the place, but it was like this little dingy, it was right next to the Park Slope Food Co-op. Mm-hmm. And it was this kind of little, you know how all the spaces in New York, they're kind of a little bit dark, and they might even be like underneath a brownstone or something at the back, and, all that sort of stuff. It was a room like that. And I'd taken a Pilates class, and I thought, right, well, I'll go ahead and take a yoga. Let me just see what this yoga is like. It's been a little while. I'll try some yoga. Because it was a different style, and I remember going in, and it was a vinyasa yoga class. And so we did sun salutations, and I was like, what is this? This is not the yoga that I know. This is awesome. I really like this. I like this moving. It felt like dancing, and I'd never been a dancer, but I'd always had this interest. In fact, I remember when I was in Melbourne, I studied tap dancing with a friend. So I always had this interest in movement in the body. And I was like, okay, this is my yoga. This is the stuff I really like. And so I started going to classes there when I could, in between running and, other things that I was sort of doing. But it was very much a physical experience.
Well, I know that, yoga in New York metro area in 1998 was very exciting. I remember showing up to a class a few years before that, and just at that time, I was teaching at that point. I was just like maybe a year and a half into teaching, 2 years into teaching or so for real, like as my main thing. And it was just booming. And it was like those classes were different. It's interesting because I talk about that a lot, about how like there was something that happened between like 1996 and 2006 in New York specifically. Yeah. And that description that you made of like the first one being like lots of resting in between where you dozed off to like, there's no dozing off in that vinyasa class that you went to. Nah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there was a real kind of shift in the way classes were and different sorts of practices that were becoming more readily available.
Yeah. And I had a friend, I remember, because at that point I was working in a bank. And I was doing project management stuff in one of the investment banks. And I had a friend who had found Ashtanga Vinyasa. And I think she was even going to Jivamukti as well. And she was right into it. She was, early mornings and doing Mysore practices and all that sort of stuff. And the stuff that I was doing in Brooklyn really wasn't as intense as that. But I remember talking to her a lot about what she was doing and just seeing her passion for it and just kind of wondering a little bit. And then we left New York in about 2006, I think it was. And we decided that we were going to give up like our jobs. Like I'd quit working in the corporate sphere by then, and I'd had 2 kids in 2004 and twins. Not 2 pregnancies in 2004.
I see you had 2 kids at once. Wow, that's a thing.
I did 2 kids at once. And we were like, okay, let's just, let's escape and figure out what we really want to do. And so we had a property there and we sold it because it seemed like that was the height of the boom. Yeah. Which it wasn't.
But still all. Good move. I mean, you still probably, you could have waited and really cashed in. Like now, if you had it now, it'd be like whatever.
Crazy.
2.5 mil cash or something, right?
At the time, we were like, holy moly, because we had seen things go crazy even just in the, in the few years that we'd lived in Brooklyn before we bought the place. We were like, this is nuts. How could this get any crazier than this?
I mean, as a quick aside, I mean, that's sort of what happened to my neighborhood in Williamsburg. You had all these like Italian families who bought these buildings in like 1972 for 30 grand. And,
That's
you know,
it.
they want to protect their neighborhood and the heritage of their Gilio neighborhood. But ultimately, when you can put that on the market and someone will give you $3 million cash for it tomorrow,
Yep.
it's like, how are you not going to do that for your family's future? You know what I mean? Like, so everybody eventually cashes in at some point. You know, you can't blame them.
That's exactly what happened in Park Slope. When we got there, like that gentrification, as they call it, was kind of beginning. And we lived kind of sandwiched between these two Italian families who had lived there since like the 30s. Like they'd had these buildings forever. And then slowly but surely, like by the time we left Park Slope in 2006, like I didn't even recognize it. You know, it was fancy. It was quite fancy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right, so you guys went on an adventure with very small. How old were you kids when you guys decided to embark on this?
They were 18 months old.
Are you crazy?
Well,
that's crazy, because when they're 18 months, you're still in the trenches. I mean, it's a little, but it's not like, but you're still like in the thick of it to go travel around. Well,
totally. These kids, what I learned from all of this is that kids are incredibly resilient. Yeah. They're so resilient. And so we basically like put all our stuff in storage in New York, in Long Island somewhere, and hopped on a plane, and we were like, let's go to South America. So we took the kids and we went to Panama, and we hung out there for a little while. And then we ended up in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And we really loved it. And so we ended up staying there with the kids for a couple of years. And it was fabulous. It was fantastic.
What did you guys do there? Did you find work there, or how?
Well, what we had, oh my goodness, what we did when we sold our brownstone in Brooklyn was we invested it. Because it was like rich dad, poor dad times, and we'd been in the corporate world forever, and we were like, we're tired of this. We're gonna give up the rat race and start living for ourselves kind of thing. And so we'd invested the money that we made from selling the property in other properties around. So we had some stuff up in upstate New York, in Binghamton. Yeah. And then we also had we'd invested some stuff in Ohio, in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Dayton, Ohio. We'd bought like some apartments and stuff. And we'd organized for people to manage it. And so we were going down to South America to kind of figure out what the next, what we were going to do with our lives, basically, like what we were going to do next. And so, yeah, our work was mainly just trying to figure out, like, what businesses we wanted to start. We decided we were going to be entrepreneurs, and we were going to kind of figure out what we wanted to do. My husband's a computer programmer, and so he had that experience. He had done lots of consulting work and stuff for all kinds of different industries. So we had the kids with us, and we put them in a little preschool, and so they learned lots of music and Spanish and all sorts of great stuff. And we spent our days figuring out the next steps in our lives and discovering Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga.
Well, it makes sense, First of all, what a cool thing to be in that situation where you actually get space to figure shit out.
Totally.
And then you need tools. You need something to help you. Like once, because I had that period, I had a couple of years where, I had such low rent. And I didn't have to work. I was just teaching and practicing yoga, and I didn't have I didn't have any marriage or kids or anything. Yeah. And it was like this long period of time where I was like, okay, I got to figure out who I am and what I want to be.
Yeah.
And then that's when I really, you need tools to help you. What do you do? What do you get what do you need for that?
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff like yoga and Ayurveda become very attractive.
Totally.
Yeah. So you got into Ashtanga first, you said?
Yeah. So we found a yoga studio that was like a couple of minutes walk from the apartment we were living in Argentina. And, it felt like it was the next level from the experience that I'd had in Brooklyn. It was felt more structured. It felt more serious. The teacher who we had was this amazing woman, and who spoke almost no English at all. And so she would just call out the poses and the Sanskrit names, and you just did it. You sort of went from, one pose to the next. And
if you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.